Am I recording? Hello again, it's me, Chaz, making another video. This one's on the AFC's World Cup Qualifiers, round 3. All 18 nations played each other on the Thursday, the 5th of September. There were a few surprises, like in Group B with South Korea drawing to Palestine, but the biggest shock would be Bahrain beating Australia 1-0 in Group C. Also in Group C, the match with the most goals was between Japan and China. Japan beat China 7-0. And the hosts of the last World Cup, Qatar, lost 3-1 at home to UAE in Group A. So I will discuss the other results and how each group is looking after match day 1. So let's start with Group A. Group A has United Arab Emirates, Iran, Uzbekistan, North Korea, Kyrgyzstan and Qatar. Two nations in this group, Uzbekistan and Iran, both played each other in Group E in the previous round, both having 14 points each. The two times they both played each other, they ended in draws. Very comfortable group for both nations. Turkmenistan and Hong Kong was the other two nations in their group. Both were undefeated and they've continued that run in the World Cup qualifiers by both winning their games 1-0 respectively. Uzbekistan defeated North Korea 1-0 at home, and Iran also won 1-0 against Kyrgyzstan at home, putting them both second and third in the group. But the nation who topped the group was United Arab Emirates. They defeated Qatar away from home 3-1. UAE had a great run in their group, not losing one game, almost winning everyone with just one draw. This was Qatar's first defeat in the World Cup qualifiers. In the second round, they won most of their games, only drawing one, similar to UAE, but they lost their first match in this round to UAE. Not a good start for Qatar. North Korea, on the other hand, who lost to Uzbekistan, finished second in their group in the last round. They were in Group B with Japan, who had maximum points. North Korea had a battle with Syria to get that second spot, and they were able to get it. But yeah, not a good start, losing 1-0. Kyrgyzstan was in Group D in the second round. They were in a very tight race between Oman and Malaysia. Oman took the top spot because Kyrgyzstan was able to qualify second. Malaysia and Taiwan were the two nations to be knocked out of that group. So after the very first game of the third round, UAE topped the group first, scoring the most. Iran and Uzbekistan are both joined second and third. North Korea are fourth, Kyrgyzstan's fifth, both, that's interchange. And Qatar with the worst goal difference out of the nations that did lose, up bottom. So once again, Uzbekistan 1, North Korea 0, Iran 1, Kyrgyzstan 0, and Qatar 1, UAE 3. UAE, top of the table. If it stays like this, it'll be the first time that UAE has qualified for a World Cup since 1990. So maybe that wait would be over. Iran, trying to make it 4 in a row. And Uzbekistan, if they keep this up, it'll be the first time that they will ever qualify for a World Cup. Still early days, we'll see what happens later on. In the game between Uzbekistan and North Korea, Mashivprov was the goal scorer for Uzbekistan in the 20th minute. Taremi was the goal scorer for Iran against Kyrgyzstan, scoring his 50th goal. Tokateyev, the keeper for Kyrgyzstan, made a save but spilled the ball into Taremi's path, which allowed him to score, and Iran got the 3 points. And finally, in Group A, Qatar won, UAE 3. Qatar was leading at the 38th minute with a goal from Al Hassan. But then in the second half, late in the second half, Harim Abdallah scored the equaliser for UAE. Really nice goal, great turn. But UAE wasn't done there. They managed to score another 2 goals. First in the 80th minute, Adil Harbi scored, what a strike, in the 80th minute. And then finally, about 4 minutes into extra time, Ali Saleh finished the scoring, allowing UAE a 3-1 win over Qatar away from home. Great result for them. And that was Group A. Now let's move on to Group B. So Group B has Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, South Korea, Palestine and Oman. Iraq was the only team to win in this group, defeating Oman 1-0. Jordan drew with Kuwait, and South Korea drew with Palestine. It was a big point for Palestine. South Korea being the strongest team historically from this region. 2002 was the very first World Cup an Asian team hosted. They did it with Japan. That World Cup, they managed to make it to the semi-finals. No other team from Asia has ever reached the semi-finals since then. They also have the longest running qualifying streak at a World Cup. Currently 10 World Cups since 1986. That was the second time Mexico hosted the World Cup. So yeah, this was a massive result for Palestine. And if they manage to finish first or second and qualify for this World Cup, it would be the first time they have qualified. Oman's another team that hasn't qualified for the World Cup before in this group, but losing to Iraq, not a great start for them. They were in a very tight group as well in round 2, Oman, managing to top their group, being first, and Kyrgyzstan was second, Malaysia third in that group, but there was only a few points between all 3 teams. Okay, and the team that did beat Oman, as mentioned, that was Iraq. If Iraq manages to top this group, again, come second to qualify for the World Cup, it would be the very first time they've qualified since 1986. If they do make it to the World Cup in 2026, it would be 40 years since they last competed at the World Cup. Iraq was really good in their group, getting the maximum amount of points, won every one of their games, beating Indonesia, who also qualified. Vietnam and Philippines was the other 2 teams in their group. So yeah, they're continuing their winning streak. They might finally do it. They might finally get back into the World Cup. Another team that hasn't been to the World Cup for a very long time is Kuwait, who reached the World Cup in 1982. They managed to pick up a point against Jordan, who has never qualified for the World Cup before. So in this group, half of the nations have qualified and the other half hasn't. 2 of those nations that have competed, as I mentioned, both Kuwait and Iraq. By the time of the World Cup in 2026, it would be 40 plus years for both nations, the last time they've qualified for a World Cup. On the other hand, with South Korea, this will be 11 World Cups in a row that they have competed in. South Korea was in a group with China, Thailand and Singapore. Done very well, 16 points, didn't lose a game. Yes, a slip up against Palestine, but there's still plenty of games to be played. Palestine was in the same group as Australia, who did really well, getting maximum amount of points. Palestine, on the other hand, did finish second, beating Libya just about, who had 6 points. Palestine had 8 points, very close. But yes, Palestine are in the third round, and really good start against South Korea. So yeah, that game was goalless, 0-0. But the other two games did have a goal, at least one. Iraq versus Oman. It scored from a corner. Ali Jazim took the corner, and Ayem Hussein headed it in, making it 1-0 to Iraq in the 13th minute. They held on to that lead. There was a red card for Oman right at the end. Alawi was sent off in the 5th minute of extra time. So yeah, pretty bad start for Oman, but brilliant start for Iraq. And the other draw in this group between Jordan and Kuwait was a 1-1 draw. The very first goal was scored by Jordan. Musa Al-Tamari scored from outside the box in the 14th minute to give Jordan the lead. But Kuwait, late, 2 minutes into extra time, scored a penalty. They were denied a penalty earlier, but this penalty stood. Yusuf Nasser, the captain of Kuwait, stepped up to score this penalty, making the game 1-1. Both teams take a point each. So yeah, those were all the goals from Group B. Now we move on to Group C. So Group C, probably the toughest group, I would say. This group contains Japan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Australia and China. Now I said this group had probably the biggest surprise of match day 1, with Bahrain defeating Australia 1-0 away from home. Very shocking result. That takes Bahrain to a brilliant position to kick off their campaign. Again, with teams like Japan and Saudi Arabia, who often qualify for the World Cup themselves. Japan on the second longest streak for an Asian team who has qualified for the World Cup. They're on 7 World Cups in a row. Saudi Arabia qualified for the last 2 World Cups. And Australia are 3rd by qualifying for the last 5 World Cups, making them the 3rd team in the AFC, Asian region, that has qualified for the World Cups on a consistent basis. But Bahrain managed to beat one of those nations, and that's Australia. So yes, Japan has topped this group, beating China 7-0, high score. Really put their foot down. I mean, in the other group, the other round, they had a maximum 18 points. Won every one of their games, and then starting the 3rd round by beating China so high. Great start for them. And, if they keep this up, they won't just qualify, but they could be a real threat at the next World Cup. To mention, Bahrain are 2nd after their win against Australia. 3rd and 4th, both Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. They played to a 1-1 draw against each other. Not a bad result for either team, you know, it's a decent start. Maybe Saudi Arabia would be a little more disappointed not getting a result, because, you know, they still have to play Australia and Japan, who are the other nations in this group that are extremely strong. So they probably would have fancied beating Indonesia. Indonesia were in Group F with Iraq. They managed to finish second with 10 points. Vietnam would have been their only competition. Philippines was also in that group, but only managed to play. Yeah, that leaves China and Australia at the bottom. Australia 5th and China 6th. Not a great start for China. They found it very tough in the second round, just about edging out Thailand for second place. South Korea was in their group. Both China and Thailand had 8 points, and the same amount of goals for and against. But China did defeat Thailand in the previous game, which saw China through. But yeah, not a good start for China. They really need to bounce back after such a heavy defeat to Japan. And Australia also was given a red card in that game. Yeah, not very terrible for Australia, not a good start. We'll see what happens next for them. So just a quick thing about this table. If the table was to remain the same how it is when match day 10 arrives, that would mean that both Japan and Bahrain would qualify for the World Cup, while Saudi Arabia and Indonesia will have to go through to round 4, which they'll have another chance to try and compete at the next World Cup. Australia and China would be eliminated from the competition. So yeah, that's what would happen if the table was to end the same how it is right now. Just a few things about this group, Group C. Just a couple of things I found interesting, other than Japan obviously being the very first nation from the AFC to ever host the World Cup with South Korea. Saudi Arabia will be hosting the 2034 World Cup. And Indonesia are the very first nation from Asia to ever compete at a World Cup. So I just found that a little bit interesting. Another thing, unlike the other two groups, there's only one nation in this group that hasn't competed at a World Cup in the past, and that's Bahrain. So yeah, that's a look at all three groups again. As I said before, the very first two teams will qualify for the World Cup. Third and fourth will go to the fourth round and have another chance to compete. And 5 and 6, 5th and 6th, will be eliminated. Next week, Tuesday, the 10th of September, the second day of fixtures for the third round will start. So some teams will trying to bounce back from their defeat. Others will still try and keep up the momentum. And then next month, the match day 3 and match day 4 fixtures will start. The 10th of October for match day 3, and then the 15th of October for match day 4. So that was my AFC third round World Cup Qualifiers review. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. Bye.